Welcome back. It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The whereabouts of the driver of the Range Rover on the evening of December the 6th, 1995, Craig Rolfe. On the face of things, it appears to be fairly obvious. He drops his girlfriend off at Lakeside Shopping Centre to get a new dress for a meal that they would be attending later that evening. And the next day he is found dead alongside Patrick Tate and Tony Tucker. But when you take a look at the timeline concerning these individuals and also events which happened to transpire after the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, namely the fact that Donna Jaggers was in a relationship with one of the investigating officers, D.I. Florence, this whole situation seems to go just that little bit deeper. It's a little bit more murky, shall we say. So firstly, let's take a look at some information which was recently released out into the public domain concerning an appeal document and the CCRC. It focuses around the last time that Donna Jaggers saw Craig Rolfe on December the 6th, 1995. It is submitted that Donna Jaggers' witness statement, dated the 14th of the 3rd, 1996, contradicts her account as reported by D.I. Florence in his report dated the 8th of the 12th, 95, and the police message M93, also dated the 8th of the 12th, 95. The Commission has considered Miss Jaggers' witness statement dated the 14th of March, 1996, report R4 by ex-DI Florence and police message M93. The Commission notes that the CPS disclosed report R4 in slightly redacted form to the applicants before their trial on the 11th of April 1997. It was forwarded to Defence Counsel on the 23rd of April 1997. It follows that report R4 was available to be utilised in the applicants' appeal hearings in 1999 and 2006. In any event, the Commission does not consider Miss Jaggers' account as described in report R4 to be inconsistent with her trial evidence. The Commission notes that message M93 refers to Miss Jaggers last seeing Mr. Rolfe on the morning of the 6th of December 1995, rather than at around 5:45 on the evening of the 6th of December, as she stated in her trial evidence. Okay, so just to give you a bit of an overview as to what is being spoken about here. When Donna Jaggers gave her official police statement, which was on the 14th of March 1996, many weeks after the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, she states that the last time that she saw Craig Rolfe on the 6th of December was at 17:45 when he dropped her off at Lakeside Shopping Centre. Now, many people are confused by the fact that, I think it was put out there, or it was in maybe one of the books or a documentary, that they were actually caught on CCTV. The Range Rover was seen on CCTV. It was Craig Rolfe driving, Donna Jaggers got out of the vehicle. That's a load of rubbish. There was no CCTV. There's nothing to actually verify the time that the Range Rover was at Lakeside Shopping Centre, or even if it was ever there at all. There was no CCTV or eyewitnesses to back up the version of events as put forward by Donna Jaggers. What I'm going to do for you now is narrate that very statement from Donna Jaggers dated the 14th of March 1996, and I'm going to narrate it in its entirety. The reason for this is to give you a real understanding of exactly what Donna Jaggers' position was in terms of her and Craig Rolfe and the life that they shared together. As we move towards the end of this statement, you will also hear about the plans regarding the 6th of December 1995, not only concerning Craig Rolfe, but Tony Tucker and Pat Tate. The following police statement was given on the 14th of the 3rd, 1996 by Donna Lynn Jaggers. She states the following. I am the common law wife of Craig Rolfe, whom had been my partner for 7 years. I've been asked about Craig's association with Tony Tucker and Pat Tate and their involvement with drug dealing and the circumstances surrounding their deaths. Craig had been involved with Tucker for approximately 3 or 4 years and was registered as a director of Tucker's security company running nightclub doors. This was in name only, and I know that Craig never had any involvement in running the business. His association started as a result of Tucker buying drugs from Craig. They then became more involved as time went on and they started doing drug deals together. In early 1995, Craig was not being very active and was not completing many deals, therefore he did not have much money. He was being promised that a large deal was due, which would provide him with plenty of money. In the meantime, we were just scraping to get by. I later learnt from Craig that a person called Mickey the pilot, who I now know to be called Michael Steele, was a friend of Pat Tate, who in turn was a friend of Tony Tucker. Steele I understood to be a pilot who brought drugs into the country, and I understood that he had been in prison for it. Craig told me that Steele was a ruthless person who really didn't think much of other people. In early 1995, I was aware that Tate was in prison, and I recall Tucker and one other person, whose details I do not know, running around getting Tate money together for him to finance the deal. I am fairly sure that John McCarthy had some of Tate's money. Craig told me that this was happening, and stated that Steele was happy to continue bringing it in until they were all millionaires. I cannot say when the deal took place, but I can say that at the time I witnessed the changeover of the drugs. Mickey Steele drove to Longwood Stables in Dry Street, Basildon, Essex, where Tucker had 2 horses. I arrived there with Craig and met Tony, who was with his horses. We waited for Mick to arrive, which he did in a blue Toyota RAV4. Although I had remained in our car and I had my back to where Mickey Steele had parked, I was able to look over my left shoulder towards the rear of his car. I saw Steele take a large dark-coloured kit bag, measuring approximately 3 feet in length by about 12 to 15 inches in diameter, from the boot of his car. By the way he was holding the bag, it appeared to be very heavy. He handed it to Tucker, who put it in the boot of our car, which was a Vauxhall Senator. Craig then got back into our car and we drove to another location. Craig took the holdall out of the boot and took it to a safe house where all the drugs were stored. I went into the house with Craig, who then placed the bag on the table. He opened up the bag and I saw that it contained bars of brown cannabis resin, which were all individually wrapped in a clear film. I was present when he checked as it was good quality by burning and smelling a sample and then counting the bars. I am unable to say how many bars there were. I've only met Mickey Steele on a couple of occasions and that was only in passing. I've not actually spoken to Mickey Steele. On each occasion when I have seen him, he has always made me very aware that he does not want me to look at him. The last deal which Steele carried out for them was approximately 2 weeks after Tate was released from prison, which was at the end of the 10th, 95. Craig told me that Mickey Steele was arranging to bring in £60,000 worth of cannabis from abroad. Craig put in £7,000, Tucker put in £20,000, and Tate and a 4th person called Barry Dorman were putting in the remainder of the money. A couple of days before the cannabis was collected, I went with Craig to Tucker's home address in Fobbing, Essex to hand him the £7,000, which was in a Tesco's carrier bag. The money was handed to Tucker, who was in turn going to hand it to Steele. We were only at the house for around 5 minutes, and as Craig and I were leaving and walking down the driveway towards our car, I saw Mickey Steele walking up the driveway towards the house. He passed by us and nodded to Craig. He did not speak or acknowledge myself. Steele had come from a white car which I believe he had been driving. I cannot say what the car was, but it was clean and had the appearance of an average family saloon. There was a second male in the car who had short dark hair and appeared to be a little bit younger than Steele. He appeared clean shaven, but I did not take any further notice. We got into our vehicle, which I believe was a Vauxhall Frontera, which had been loaned to Tate by Barry Dorman, and left. A couple of days later, Craig told me that Steele had been arrested by customs officers whilst he was taking his boat from the water. This was following him dropping the cannabis off at a safe point on the coastline about 3 miles away. That same day, Tate was arrested during the early afternoon, having crashed Tucker's Porsche car in Southend. I was at work and would have finished at 1500 hours that day. Craig picked me up from work and told me what had happened to Steele. About 1600 hours, Tucker phoned Craig on his mobile phone and told him about his car and what Tate had done to it. About 1800 hours that day, Craig and I drove to Southend Police Station to collect Tate. Once in the vehicle, I became aware that Tate already knew about Steele being arrested. He then used Craig's mobile phone to ring Jackie Street. He asked her if everything was safe. I took it that it was as a result of Tate's manner and subsequently what he said to Craig. He said that it was all safe. I took this to mean that the drugs had not been found. On this occasion, I did not know where the meeting between Steele and the others was to take place. But after a couple of days, Craig brought his share of the cannabis round to our house in Chafford 100. Because the cannabis had already been sold on, the same day Craig and I took it up to the Golders Green area of North London, where Craig handed it on to a black male called Gary. No money was exchanged because the cannabis was what's known as laid on. Gary for him to sell and then pay Craig. The agreed amount per kilo worked out to be approximately £10,000 for the lot. Already the others had placed their own share with other dealers, but very quickly they started receiving phone calls telling them that the cannabis was very poor quality. I learnt through Craig that Tate and Tucker were very agitated because Steele during this time was trying to push the price that he wanted up. In effect, this was eating into their personal profit from the deal. They contacted Steele and told him they wanted their money back because the cannabis was rubbish. Steele didn't want to take it back. Tate and Tucker then started putting real pressure on Steele to recover the money. By pressure, I mean through intimidation. I cannot say exactly what they did because I do not know, but I do recall hearing conversations they had with Steele on the phone where they were ranting and raving at one another and pacing up and down. I understand that Steele finally agreed to return the cannabis and get their money back for them. Tate, in a fit of temper about the whole affair, smashed each slab before it was returned. Steele had told them that a parcel the same size had been picked up by mistake, and that's how the problem had come about. I am not certain, but I think on this occasion Steele had to collect the cannabis from Tucker's home address in order to return it. Steele arranged to hand the money back to them on the continent. He was going to return the goods to his suppliers and then take the money to a pre-arranged location where he was to meet Craig, Tucker and Tate. The day they were going to meet coincided with Tony Tucker's birthday, which was the 17th of November. His girlfriend Anna had pre-booked a surprise night in a London hotel prior to the trip to collect the money being made. Therefore, Tony was not going to go. They wanted a group of people to go over in order that the money could be divided up to bring back into this country. Craig asked me to go, but I refused because I was not happy about getting involved and didn't want to go. The eventual party consisted of Barry Dorman and his wife, who went in their own car, Pat Tate and Craig with 3 girls, Donna Garwood, Liz Fletcher and Gaynor Hazer. They travelled in the Range Rover and left via Harwich. Craig did tell me where they went to, but I cannot remember the location or where they stayed. I know that they stayed overnight in a hotel and were met by Mickey Steele. I was told that he met Tate and they went into a separate room. They returned the next day with the money. Whilst all this was going on, I was told that Steele was promising Tate that he had a big job lined up for him. Craig told me that Steele had approached Tate and asked him to nick someone else's gear from them. I understood that Steele had been asked by a London-based drugs firm to import 30 kilos of Charlie, and I believed that he was going to bring it in by plane from Holland. He had told Pat Tate that he was going to be given £50,000 as an upfront payment to take to Holland, and he was going to bring the Charlie back in company with a member of the London firm. The idea was that Pat Tate and Tony Tucker would rob the firm of the Charlie when it arrived over here. Steele had stated that he wanted to share it between them and had told the firm that he was going to land near to Clacton. Craig told me that Steele was planning to actually land in South Essex, but I never knew exactly where this was likely to be. Craig, Tony and Pat had previously obtained a machine gun from a man called Mad Mick Bowman, and the details of this are subject of a previous statement. Tate and Tucker were going to use the gun on the man from the firm in order to take the Charlie. I knew that they had made sure the gun worked, but I did not know how far they were planning to go when they robbed the firm. Steele was going to land the plane, and Tate and Tucker were then going to take the complete load. It was going to be split eventually, 10 kilos each, and was going to be taken to John McCarthy. Craig told me that McCarthy was going to pay them nearly £1 million for the load, which was for Tate or Tucker to divide. Not long after Craig had told me about this, he told me that Tate and Tucker had decided that he was going to drive the load away once it had been taken and go to McCarthy's with it. They had told Craig that they intended to rip Steele off by cutting 3 kilos of the cocaine into 10 kilos of impure. This would have resulted in Tate and Tucker having 27 kilos between them. The remaining 3 kilos was going to be taken to Mick Bowman, and he was going to cut it for them. I do not know what the arrangements were to get the 3 kilos to Bowman or to get the 10 kilos of impure back to Steele. By this time, I was getting very worried by Craig's involvement and told him that I didn't want him to have any part in it. He told me that Steele didn't know that he was going to be driving, and he convinced me that he wasn't as heavily involved as the other two in what was going to happen. He also talked about the money which was likely to be coming their way and how that would enable us to go ahead with whatever plans we wanted. I realised that I wasn't going to be able to talk him out of it, and albeit I really didn't want him to go through with it, but in the end I gave up. I believed that by this time he was in too deep. Craig told me that the money had been paid to Mickey Steele, who had taken it to Holland. The weather had changed and there was now snow on the ground. Craig told me this was causing them delay and they were waiting for it to clear. On the day of the murder, I was working as normal and was due to finish at 1500 hours. That evening, Tony Tucker and his girlfriend Anna, Craig and I, and Pat Tate and a girlfriend named Claire were all going to the GlobalNet Caf restaurant in Romford. We were going out because they believed they were coming into money and they were going to have a pre-celebration. Craig phoned me at work in the afternoon and told me that Mickey Steele had contacted Pat Tate and said that he wanted to meet with Tate and Tucker to go and look at somewhere they could land a light aircraft. Craig mentioned to me that they had been to, or were going to, I can't remember which, to the TGI Fridays restaurant at Lakeside. I later found out that this had been Tate, Tucker and Craig and a person called Peter Cuthbert. I do not know why they met or what was discussed. I left work at 1500 hours that day and went home. The meal at Romford was booked for 2200. I was busy wrapping Christmas presents when Craig returned home with our daughter. We were at home together for about an hour and a half. Craig told me that I was to be ready for 1900 hours to go out. He was going with the others to look at the airstrip and then would come to collect me. Craig wanted me to have something new to wear for the evening and took me to the Lakeside shopping centre at 17:45. He was driving the Range Rover and left me to go and pick up Tony Tucker. Craig told me that he was going because he didn't want Tony to be in a position to say that he hadn't had any part in the arranging. I also understood that Craig was going to collect Tony Tucker from his home and they were going to meet Tate and Steele later. I did not have contact from Craig, Tate or Tucker after this point. Okay, so here we have a timeline put forth by Donna Jaggers that she was dropped off at 5:45 at Lakeside Shopping Centre by Craig Rolfe. He was then going to make his way to Tony Tucker's house to pick him up, and they were going to meet Steele and Tate later in the evening. Now, before we get to another statement which completely contradicts what Donna Jaggers is claiming here, there is a statement which exists which does add a tiny bit of credibility in terms of what she is saying here. Now, we know on December the 7th, when the bodies of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were discovered, they were all wearing jeans. Now, this might sound a little bit strange, but do bear with me. Craig Rolfe is wearing denim jeans. But on the afternoon of December the 6th, he is approached by a police officer, and this police officer in the following statement describes what Craig Rolfe was wearing. This statement can tell us that at least during some part of the afternoon, Craig Rolfe must have in fact have gone back home to change his clothes. Anyway, let's take a look at the following statement. The following police statement is from Philip Pullinger, dated the 8th of December 1995. He states the following. Around 16:30 hours on Wednesday the 6th of December 1995, I was on duty in plain clothes in company with DC 2051 Williams in an unmarked police vehicle. At this time, I left Grays Police Station and drove into Brook Road. As I did so, I saw a blue Range Rover, index F424NPE, which was travelling in front of my vehicle. I was aware that Craig Rolfe was a user of this vehicle. The vehicle parked in Brook Road, adjacent to the front entrance to the police station, and I parked my vehicle directly behind it. I got out of my vehicle, and as I did so, the driver and sole occupant of the Range Rover also got out. I recognised the driver to be a person whom I know to be Craig Rolfe. I called out to Rolfe and had a conversation with him regarding a future appointment to obtain a statement from his common-law wife, Miss Jaggers. The conversation lasted for a few seconds, and as I recollect, Rolfe was wearing a black puffy leather jacket and tracksuit bottoms. I then returned to my vehicle. I did not see where Rolfe went to as he walked away from his vehicle. I then left the scene. I can be certain that the male I spoke to was Craig Rolfe. So here we have, at around 4:30 p.m. on the 6th of December, an eyewitness account of Craig Rolfe being seen in Grays, near Grays Police Station, not too far from his own home address, and he's wearing tracksuit bottoms. Now, we know at some point in time he must have gone home to have changed that clothing, and that does coincide or match up with the version of events as put forth by Donna Jaggers. But where this starts to get a little bit more bizarre is when we take a look at the following eyewitness account that doesn't just mention Craig Rolfe driving the Range Rover, but also identifies Tony Tucker and potentially Pat Tate being seen in the back of the Range Rover. Let's take a look at that following eyewitness account. The following police statement is from Andrew Charles Reynolds, dated the 2nd of the 1st, 1996. He states the following. I currently work as a mechanic at Basildon Tyre Services, Cranes Close, Basildon, where I have worked for the last year. There are 4 other people who work at the garage. They are Colin Russell, the new manager, Steve Thomas, who is likely assistant manager, and 2 tyre fitters, Alan Crew and Rob, who I cannot remember his surname. Part of our work involves carrying out repair work on motor vehicles. Since my school days, I have known Craig Rolfe on a friendship basis only, but not on a social level. After I started working at the garage, I became aware of Craig Rolfe's friends whom he seemed to socialise with. They were Tony Tucker and Pat Tate. I knew Tony before, but only as a person who used to work on the doors at nightclubs. Pat Tate I only met a few months ago when he came with Craig and Tony into the garage when I was working. From early November 95, Craig started to bring vehicles to the garage to be fixed. The first vehicle was a Peugeot which over a period of a week or so Craig brought in twice, first for the brakes and secondly for the engine which had blown. As a result of this, Craig borrowed a blue J-registered Vauxhall Frontera from the garage due to having the vehicle in. Craig always used to ring the garage to check up on it. Around about the 29th or the 30th of November 1995, Tony and Craig brought in a private plated Vitara motor vehicle coloured metallic blue and grey for new tyres. I'd been awaiting this vehicle as Craig had been ringing us to ask us when we had the tyres ready. As far as I am aware, the Vitara belonged to Tony's girlfriend. They took the vehicle the same day, having waited for the tyres to be fitted. However, on the following Monday, the 4th of December 95, the Vitara was brought back to us as it had lost reverse. The following day, the 5th of December 95, Tony called the garage and asked to pick up the Vitara. However, the vehicle needed longer for repair, so it was kept until the 6th. On the 6th of December 1995, I was again working at the garage when at around 10 or 11 am, Pat Tate arrived at the garage with a girl I knew only as Pat's girlfriend Liz. They arrived by car, Pat in his black E or F registered 190 Mercedes and Liz in a Polo motor vehicle, black in colour on an E or F plate. The Polo was left at the garage for repair and Pat then phoned someone who he called Tony, and I took this to be Tony Tucker. He asked about the Vitara and arrangements were made that Pat would take the Vitara away and Liz drove the Mercedes. Sometime that afternoon, Steve told me that Pat had telephoned, and from talking with Steve, I understood that Pat was desperate to get the Polo back for his girlfriend. Later that day, I received a call at the garage from Pat, who asked about collecting the Polo, and arrangements were made that if Pat had not turned up by 1800 hours, when we were due to close, then I would leave the Polo on the forecourt with the keys in the glove box. At 1800 hours on the 6th of December 1995, the garage closed and I left the Polo on the forecourt with the keys in as arranged with Pat. As I drove away from the garage in my white Astra van, registration C385VAA, Steve was behind me in his E-registered grey BMW 325, and in front of me was Alan in his blue Orion, registration I knew as G-ENO. I drove onto Cranes Close and along Cranes Farm Road towards the roundabout junction with East Main Basildon. As I got to the roundabout, the time was only about 18:05, where I saw a blue Range Rover which I recognised as one Craig, Tony and Pat use. I knew it was them and their Range Rover as I had seen them with it on several occasions before. I could clearly see Craig was driving, Tony was in the front passenger seat, and there was a stocky male between the seats at the back, and I took this to be Pat Tate, as this was the usual way they sat when I had seen them in the past. They were travelling on the other side of Cranes Farm Road in the opposite direction to me, heading towards the garage. I thought they were going to collect the Polo. I recalled the registration of the Range Rover as an F plate. Around 2100 hours to 2200 hours that evening, I had cause to drive down Cranes Farm Close and past the garage. I looked and saw the Polo had gone, and I took it that Pat had collected it. I never saw Craig, Tony and Pat again. Sometime in the afternoon of Thursday the 7th of December, I was working at the garage when I heard that all three had been found dead in a Range Rover. This started as a result of calls being made to the garage about a report of a Range Rover being found with 3 dead people inside. Believing it was Craig, Pat and Tony, I telephoned Pat's girlfriend Liz at around 2 to 3 p.m. that same afternoon. I telephoned one of Pat's mobile phone numbers, which was answered by a female who I took to be Liz. I asked her about the killings and she said she didn't know anything about it. Now the statement of Donna Jaggers and the statements here from Andrew Reynolds, the tie fitter, these two statements cannot live with each other. You can see here that it's around about a 21-minute journey from Lakeside Shopping Centre to where this eyewitness account took place. So that would make quite a lot of sense. What doesn't make any sense, however, is the fact that Craig Rolfe was on his own when he dropped off Donna Jaggers at Lakeside Shopping Centre. So to have the amount of individuals in the Range Rover as described by Andrew Reynolds, Rolfe would have had to have then gone from Lakeside to Tony's address, picked up Tony, gone to Pat's address, picked up Pat, and then driven towards Basildon Tyre Services. So these two statements cannot live with each other. Also, what is worthy of mention is the fact that the weather conditions on December the 6th, 1995 were less than ideal. We had this snow that was on and off through the afternoon, early evening time. We had the potential of slow-moving traffic congestion. So even if he could have got there in 20 minutes, it does not account for the fact that he has not picked up these other two individuals. It's not as if he's gone to Tucker's house, Tucker is waiting on the curb to be picked up. He literally opens the door, jumps inside, and they drive off to Tate's house, and by some miracle he's waiting on the curb and he just jumps in and then they drive. Even if that were the case and it was done in the quickest way possible, they still could not have got to near Crane's Farm Close for that other eyewitness account given by the tyre fitter. It's most likely the case that Rolfe drove to Tucker's house. He may have had to wait for a few minutes for Tucker to appear. The same also when collecting Pat Tate. So we're talking about, adding minutes on, additional minutes on to an already pressed timescale. Where it gets even more bizarre is the fact that, as you heard early on in this video, we have this police report which was taken down by none other than D.I. Florence, the man who later went on to have relations with Donna Jaggers after Craig Rolfe's death. It's mentioned there by him the day after the bodies were discovered that Donna Jaggers claims that the last time that she saw Craig Rolfe was on the morning of the 6th, not the afternoon. So then naturally your next question will most likely be, well, what need would there be to lie? Why would there be this necessity to lie? What would Donna Jaggers potentially gain from giving a false timeline? And then we take a look at the next statement. The following police statement is from Donna Jaggers, dated the 8th of the 2nd, 1996. I am the girlfriend of Craig Rolfe and have known him for 15 years. We first met when I moved to Basildon with my parents. I started going out with Craig when I was 18, but that was quite a casual relationship. In 1988, just after my 19th birthday, we started a serious relationship, and soon after that I moved in with his parents in Basildon. I fell pregnant in December 89 and I gave birth to our daughter. We had moved into a hostel and were given 105 Spurriers, Rettendon. During this time, Craig was working on a building site doing dry lining. We then moved to 21 Bardfield Vange, but I cannot be sure of the dates or when this was. In March 1994, Craig bought 8 Kelshot Avenue, Chafford 100 Greys. The house at Bardfield was in my name, and I managed to swap this house through the council for my current address. The neighbours at Bardfield were very nosy, and I wanted to avoid problems due to the fact I only went back there once a week to collect mail, etc. I took my current address with a view to buying it and then renting it out. My relationship with Craig was strong. He trusted me and told me most things that he was up to. In May 1995, I had had enough of the drugs. He was using them himself and involved with them and dealing. I moved out of the Calshot's address and went to my current address. After about 3 weeks, Craig came back and told me that he was going to make an effort to kick his drug habit. I knew instinctively that he meant this, and we went away on holiday to the Norfolk Broads for a week. When we came back, he had one lapse, but stuck to it. Most weekends, Craig used to go out, and I knew that he took smaller amounts of cocaine and used ecstasy, but not on the scale that he had been. I was aware that Craig's associates were Tony Tucker and Patrick Tate. During the mid to the end of November 1995, I was aware that they had something going on which at this time I am not willing to discuss. Craig told me that he was going to pick up a machine gun with a silencer and ammunition for their business. He told me that this was coming from a man I know as Mad Mick, who comes from London. I do know that this person is Mick Bowman. I asked Craig how much the gun was going to cost, and he told me that it was being borrowed and was going back to Bowman. About a week after Tony's birthday, which was the 17th of November, I went with Craig and others who I do not want to name to Hollywood's nightclub in Romford. Bowman was supposed to have met us in the Global Net Cafe beforehand, but he didn't turn up. I then met him through Craig in the nightclub. I recall thinking that he wasn't what I had expected. Craig had told me stories about him. He was with a girl who I only know as Debbie. About a week after this, I can be no more precise than that, Craig told me that we were going to meet Mick at the Thurrock Services to collect the gun. I went with Craig in the blue Range Rover, F424NPE, to the services and had something to eat in the Granada premises. I knew that we were supposed to meet Bowman at around 1300 hours, but he was about 10 minutes late. Craig went outside and returned shortly and told me I was to go outside with them. When I got outside, I saw that Bowman was there with a white VW Corrado car, and there was another male with an old green Vauxhall Cavalier. Bowman was acting very paranoid, and I took it that he was on cocaine and was acting hyper because of the situation with the gun. I am aware of how people behave when they have taken cocaine, and that is how Bowman appeared to me. Bowman was trying to organise how they should drive off to a different location. Craig then suggested we should lead. The Cavalier should go in the middle, and then Bowman at the end. This only took a matter of minutes. Craig and I then got into the Range Rover and drove onto the A13 and travelled along to the Five Bells roundabout. We then came all the way around the Five Bells roundabout, and Craig pulled up on the Eastern Garage's parking area. The Cavalier parked behind us, and Bowman parked the Corrado behind that. We all got out, and I started to walk away to stay out of the way. I saw a blue/grey holdall come out of the boot of the Cavalier and go into the boot of the Range Rover. The driver of the Cavalier was a small man around 5 foot 6 inches tall, early 20s or early 30s, of thin build. He had short cropped hair and wore glasses. I did not hear him speak. I'm unable to say who took the holdall out of the Cavalier, but I believe Craig would probably have put it in the Range Rover because he was impatient like that. Craig called me back to the car, and I got into the front of the Range Rover. I recall Bowman got into the back of the car and told Craig that he wanted the Range Rover once Craig had finished with it. Bowman then got out of the car, and Craig and I drove off and went to Patrick Tate's bungalow in Gordon Road, Basildon. Craig had told me that Tate had spoken with the garage proprietor at Eastern Garages, a man called Barry Dorman, and told him that he had to buy Bowman's Corrado. I was aware that Bowman was going to stay behind at the garage and speak to Dorman about this. I recall seeing the two men walking towards one another when I was in the Range Rover. When we arrived outside Pat Tate's house, Pat and Tony Tucker were sitting in Anna Whitehead's Suzuki Vitara. I cannot remember if Craig had spoken to them on his mobile phone prior to arriving at the house. Tony and Pat got out of the Vitara, and Craig took the holdall and gun from the boot, and all three went into the house. Sarah Saunders was at this time moving her stuff out of the house with the help of two friends. I didn't want to get involved in what was potentially a difficult situation, so I stayed in the car. Craig was in the house for about 10 to 15 minutes and then returned to the car with the holdall and gun. He put the items back in the boot and then drove to 108 Mill Green, where the gun and holdall were put into the loft. On the way from Gordon Road, Craig was saying how pleased they were with it and how much damage it could cause. I did not see the gun at this time. A couple of days later, Craig picked me up from work and told me that Tony, Pat and him had tested the gun. He stated that it was tested over at Tony's fobbing address in the field. He told me that he had cleaned it all and that he had put it back in the loft. He told me that he had cleaned his fingerprints off the gun, as I was concerned about this. The next thing that happened was that Craig, Tony and Pat were found shot dead. I had a lot of things on my mind, but I realised that the machine gun was a problem. I knew the police didn't know about the Mill Green address, and I thought it would be safe to leave it here. During the Christmas period of 1995, Craig's brother moved my belongings from Trafford 100 to the Mill Green address. First thing after New Year 1996, I moved into Mill Green. I'd only been in the house for a couple of days when I decided that I was going to have to do something about the gun. I spoke to Craig's mum about it, and she suggested I took it round to her house. She was trying to get me to sort it out. I put the holdall on the dining room table and I opened the bag. Until this point I had not seen the gun. It was a dull silvery grey colour. I only opened the top of the bag and did not see the silencer or ammunition. However, I believed they were in there because Craig had told me. I was now in a position where I had to make a decision as to what I was going to do about it. I left the gun in the bag and I left it at Craig's mother's. A couple of days later, I contacted D.I. Florence, who came to see me the next day. I only told him that I wanted to see him, but I didn't tell him what it was about. Around 11:45 a.m. on Thursday the 11th of January 96, D.I. Florence came to see me at Mill Green, and I told him about the gun at Craig's mother's house. I then took Mr. Florence to 158 Beambridge, Basildon, where I saw Craig's mother. I asked her where she had put the holdall. I then went to the shower room, which is on the ground floor, and put the holdall on the dining room table for Mr. Florence to see. He asked if any of us had touched it, and he took it into his possession. At this time, this is all I can say about the gun. Referring back to the VW Corrado, I am aware that from talking to Craig that the vehicle was purchased by Eastern Garages, and I believe Bowman was given about £7,000. Craig told me that Bowman had paid £10,000 for it. So here we have a woman who has lost her long-term partner, has a young child to look after, doesn't actually give her official police statement until some months after the murders, which I do find a little bit strange to say the least. She becomes involved romantically, by all accounts, with this D.I. Florence, the man that you've seen in the photographs here, the very person who attends the property where she hands over this illegal firearm, which she is in possession of. And then we have the supposed existence of this document claiming that originally she stated that the last time that she saw Craig Rolfe was on the morning of the 6th of December. My questions would be, why did it take so long for Donna Jaggers to give her official police statements, particularly when in the book Blogs 19, Detective Inspector Dibley is talking about Donna Jaggers coming forward with a new statement 36 hours after the murders, yet her actual official statements don't appear until March 1996. What is the reason for that delay? Is it beyond the realms of possibility to suggest that as this woman was romantically involved with D.I. Florence, a person who was involved in the investigation into the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, that at some point in time she was swayed, or her evidence was swayed, to back up the prosecution's case, particularly surrounding the timeline of the murders? So do leave your own thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Which eyewitness account do you see more favourably? Do you believe in Donna Jaggers' version of events, the long-term common law wife of Craig Rolfe, or the tyre fitter Andrew Reynolds, someone who had known Craig Rolfe for many years and also knew Tony Tucker and Pat Tate, someone who seemingly doesn't have a dog in the race? Do leave your own thoughts and theories in the comment section below. As always, many thanks for joining me for today's video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for today's video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.